The cold that settled over Coeur d'Alene in February didn't fall. It descended, deliberate and total, pressing the lake flat beneath 2 feet of ice and chasing every honest person indoors before sundown. Former Sergeant Reyna Foss was not an honest person anymore. Not by the government's definition. She crouched in the narrow gap between a boarded-up hardware store and a restaurant dumpster on Sherman Avenue, her back against frozen brick, her arms wrapped around 80 pounds of trembling Belgian Malinois. She had given Bolt her field jacket an hour ago. She wasn't cold anymore. She was past cold. 11 months. 11 months of bus stations paid in cash, of sleeping in parking garages and unlocked laundromats, of working 3-day kitchen jobs under fake names before the fear got loud enough to make her move on again. 11 months of watching Bolt grow thinner, his ribs pressing closer to the surface of his fawn and black coat every week, his dark eyes still tracking movement out of pure instinct, even when his body no longer had the energy to act on it. He had been 69 pounds of muscle and lethal precision when they left Camp Lejeune. He was 53 now. The night before their last mission in Syria, Reyna had made Bolt a promise. She'd told him, like she always told him before a dangerous op, that she'd bring him home. She'd kept half of that promise. The mission itself had been clean, a compound raid outside Al-Tanf, targeting a financial network funneling money to 3 separate insurgent cells. Bolt had done his job perfectly. While the rest of the unit hit the main building, he had pulled Reyna down a side corridor to a false floor panel the intelligence teams had missed entirely. Beneath it, documents, hard currency, and a small matte black device no bigger than a thumb drive, a tactical satellite communicator chip in a sealed titanium housing, the kind used for encrypted long-range transmissions. Bolt had pawed at it, and then, as the building erupted around them with the crack of returning fire and someone called the extraction code over the radio, he did what 6 years of training had burned into his instincts. He swallowed it. Small objects retrieved in hot zones went down the throat or got left behind. Those were the only 2 options. Reyna hadn't thought twice about it in the chaos of getting her team out. Colonel Pierce Hadley had thought about it constantly ever since. She hadn't understood why, 3 days after they returned to base, Hadley had come personally to the kennel unit. Not through his aide, not through the chain of command, but personally, his boots perfectly polished and his expression carrying the flat affect of a man running a calculation rather than delivering news. He told her Bolt had been flagged for behavioral reassessment following head trauma sustained during extraction. He told her the veterinary panel had determined the dog was no longer deployable. He told her euthanasia was scheduled for the following morning at 700, and that she was welcome to be present or not, whichever she preferred. He'd said it the way someone says whichever you prefer, when they mean it doesn't matter which you choose. Reyna had asked to see the behavioral assessment. Hadley told her it was classified under operational security protocols. She asked which veterinarian had signed off. He told her that was also classified. She'd nodded, said yes sir, walked back to the kennel. And then she'd waited until 200 cut the lock on the kennel run with wire snips borrowed from the motor pool, loaded Bolt into a civilian rental she'd paid for 3 days earlier in cash, and driven northeast until the base was a rumor in the rearview mirror. That had been 11 months ago. Now Bolt lifted his head from her lap and let out a sound she had never heard from him in 6 years. Not a whine, not a bark, but a low, rattling exhale that frightened her more than anything the military had ever thrown at her. His gums, when she gently lifted his lip to check them in the dim spill of a distant streetlight, were pale, not the healthy pink she'd memorized the way a medic memorizes a baseline pulse. Pale, nearly white at the edges. "Stay with me," Reyna said. Her voice was almost nothing. A pair of boots stopped on the icy sidewalk, directly in front of the alley opening. She tensed. Her hand dropped to the fixed blade knife on her hip. Bolt didn't growl. He didn't have the energy. That dog is going into shock. The voice was a woman's, dry and unhurried, with the particular authority of someone who had been the most competent person in every room she'd ever entered and had long since stopped being surprised by it. And you are approximately 45 minutes from hypothermia, which I suspect you already know. Reyna looked up. The woman standing at the mouth of the alley was old in the way that mountains are old, not diminished by it, only more densely herself. She was perhaps 88, perhaps 92, her white hair pinned beneath a dark wool hat, her posture absolutely straight despite the carved mahogany cane she carried in her left hand. Her coat was the color of midnight, heavy and expensive. Her eyes, even in the poor light, were river ice gray, entirely clear and missing nothing. "I don't need help," Reyna said. "You need a great deal of help," the woman said pleasantly, "but we can discuss the specifics inside. My house is 3 blocks from here. I have a fireplace and a very competent heater, and a kitchen that is not a dumpster." She tilted her head slightly, studying Bolt. "He needs warmth and fluids within the next hour, or the decision will be made for both of you by forces that don't care what you want." Reyna's grip on the knife didn't loosen. "Who are you?" "Constance Bellamy," the woman said, "and you are Sergeant Reyna Foss, formerly of the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, K9 Unit. Your dog is Bolt, Belgian Malinois, service number K9M226. You have been listed as OWL for 11 months and 2 weeks, and there is currently a military warrant with your name on it, signed by a Colonel Pierce Hadley." A pause, brief and precise. "Does that cover the introductions adequately, or shall I continue?" The sidewalk seemed to tilt. Reyna's fingers went cold around the knife handle in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. "How?" "3 blocks, Constance said, and turned and began walking, not waiting, not looking back to see if she was followed. Reyna looked down at Bolt. His breathing was shallow and fast. His dark eyes found her face with the specific, gutting trust that dogs have and that humans spend their whole lives trying to deserve. She sheathed the knife. She gathered Bolt's 53 pounds. It used to be 69. It used to be 69, against her chest, and followed the old woman into the snow. The house on Lakeview Terrace was the kind of home that had been built when people still believed buildings should outlast the people who commissioned them. 3 stories of dark brick and timber, iron-gated, lit from within by the amber warmth of real fires. Constance Bellamy pushed open the front door and stepped aside without ceremony. The heat hit Reyna like a physical force. Bolt made a sound low in his throat, not distress, something approaching relief. "The rug, away from the fire," Constance said, closing the door behind them. "His temperature needs to come up gradually, not all at once." Reyna lowered Bolt onto a wool rug near but not adjacent to the stone fireplace. He stretched immediately, his muscles unclenching in stages, a long trembling exhale rolling through his whole body. Reyna sat cross-legged beside him, one hand on his ribs, counting his breaths. She used the time to look at the room. The walls told a story the old woman hadn't needed to speak aloud. Framed photographs, shadow boxes behind glass, a silver star, a Legion of Merit, dress uniform portraits of a man with general stars on his shoulders, photographed across several decades. Young and severe, middle-aged and harder, old and something Reyna could only read as burdened. An American flag, folded into a triangle in a walnut case with a brass plate on the front. Constance returned carrying a silver tray, a mug of black coffee, a bowl of chicken broth with white rice, a smaller dish of plain boiled chicken cut into fragments. "Small amounts, from your hand," she said, setting the tray down. "If he eats too fast, his stomach will cramp." Reyna didn't need the instruction. She'd been Bolt's handler for 6 years, and she knew his stomach better than most people knew their own. But she appreciated that Constance had offered it, the way a peer offers information, rather than the way most people offered it, with the assumption that she didn't know her own dog. She fed Bolt from her palm, piece by piece, watching the light return slowly to his dark eyes the way dawn works, quietly from the edges first. When Bolt had eaten enough and dropped his chin to her knee with a weight that felt like gratitude, Reyna turned to the broth and drank half of it in 3 swallows without pausing. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. "You know my name," she said. "I know considerably more than your name, Sergeant." Constance settled into a high-backed chair across the room, both hands resting on the carved head of her cane. "My late husband was Brigadier General Howard Bellamy. He spent 31 years in Army Signal Corps intelligence. He spent the last 4 months of his life building a classified case against Colonel Pierce Hadley." Reyna set down the mug. The case concerned Hadley's use of encrypted tactical communicator chips to transmit real-time targeting data to a financial intermediary connected to 2 of the insurgent networks your unit was assigned to disrupt. Constance continued. Her voice was precise and level, but something moved beneath it, the compressed pressure of grief that has been held a long time under the surface and has learned to function as something else. Hadley was paid per actionable target. 11 soldiers died in an ambush in the Deir ez-Zor corridor 14 months ago. The ambush was possible because someone with access to classified movement orders sold their patrol route 48 hours before they moved. The broth turned cold in Reyna's stomach. Howard had traced the encrypted traffic to a specific communicator chip, Constance said. A chip that, according to the helmet camera footage from your unit's Al-Tanf raid, was retrieved from the floor of a compound corridor by your dog. She looked at Bolt and swallowed before extraction. Reyna's eyes dropped to Bolt's abdomen. A slow, spreading horror moved through her chest. "Hadley didn't order the euthanasia because Bolt was injured," she said. "It wasn't a question. Hadley ordered euthanasia because a military veterinary facility is one of the few places where a dog's stomach contents can be legally inventoried without a criminal warrant. He needed the chip back, and he needed it before anyone else knew to look for it." Constance reached into the breast pocket of her coat and withdrew a sealed envelope. Howard was scheduled to present his evidence to the Inspector General on a Thursday. He died the previous Sunday in a single vehicle accident on a road he had driven every day for 9 years. She placed the envelope on the table between them and did not look away from Reyna's face. "I have been waiting 14 months for the right instrument to use against Pierce Hadley. You and that dog are the instrument." Reyna stared at the envelope. She didn't reach for it yet. "If Bolt swallowed the chip," she said carefully, "where is it now?" Constance reached back into the envelope and withdrew a film sheet, black and white, high contrast. A veterinary X-ray. She set it on the low table. The rectangular shadow in Bolt's abdominal cavity glowed white and hard against the grey surrounding tissue. A titanium tactical housing, 4 centimeters by 1. Indigestible. It cannot be passed naturally. It has been lodged in his lower intestinal tract for nearly a year. She let Reyna look at it for a long moment. "The weight loss you attributed to the road and the stress has an additional cause, Sergeant. The housing is creating a toxic blockage. It is slowly poisoning him." Reyna put her hand over Bolt's ribcage. His heartbeat moved against her palm. Slow, too slow, uneven at the edges in a way she had noticed for weeks, and told herself was exhaustion. "I thought I was keeping him safe," she said. "You were," Constance said without cruelty. "You still are. But now you need a surgeon." She rose. She crossed to a velvet pull cord beside the fireplace and gave it one steady tug. A door at the back of the room opened. A man in his late 60s entered wearing a fleece vest over surgical scrubs, carrying a stainless steel medical case in both hands. He had the hands of someone who had spent a career doing precise things under pressure, and the eyes of someone who had learned to live with what precision sometimes still couldn't save. "This is Dr. Warren Tilson," Constance said. "Chief veterinary surgeon at Camp Pendleton for 18 years. He knew my husband, and he has been prepared for this since yesterday. Dr. Tilson looked at Reyna directly. The ship needs to come out tonight. His heart rate tells me we have a narrow window for safe anesthesia. If we wait until morning, we're rolling dice I don't want to roll. Reyna looked at Bolt. The Malinois had lifted his head and was watching her, not with fear, with the steady, unblinking attention he had given her through 6 years of raids and extractions and 12-hour road patrols, and every dark room they'd entered without knowing what was waiting inside. He'd followed her into all of it. He would follow her into this too. She put her forehead against his, felt his warm breath on her face. "Do it," she said quietly. "Bring him back to me." They had moved Bolt to the surgical room in the basement. Dr. Tilson's space, arranged with the compressed efficiency of a field surgeon who trusted nothing that wasn't within reach, when the lights died. Not a flicker, not a gradual dim, a hard total cut. The house dropped into silence and blackness at exactly the same moment. 3 seconds later, the basement generator engaged, and the surgical room's lights returned. The rest of the house stayed dark. Constance's voice came through the wall intercom without any trace of alarm, which was somehow more frightening than if she had shouted. "He's cut the main breaker at the exterior panel. He is inside the fence line." Dr. Tilson looked at Reyna. His face had gone pale, but his hands were still. "I can operate down here. The power will hold, but I cannot be interrupted for any reason." Reyna was already moving. She took the steel flashlight from her jacket pocket. She palmed a surgical blade from the instrument tray. She looked at Bolt one last time, sedated now, his chest rising and falling with the slow regularity of the anesthesia, his face completely relaxed, at peace in a way she hadn't seen on him in almost a year. "Lock this door," she told Dr. Tilson. "Don't open it for anyone but me." The main floor was absolute dark. Reyna moved through it the way 6 years of K9 work had taught her to move through hostile structures. Weight on the outer edges of her feet, no sound, breath controlled into something slow and nearly invisible. She had done this in buildings in 3 different countries where the people waiting in the dark had military training and automatic weapons and the advantage of knowing the floor plan. This was the same. It was always the same. She found the conservatory by the sound of a window latch giving way. Quiet and professional, the specific quietness of someone who was paid for it. She pressed her back against the door frame and counted footsteps. 1 set, moving with the deliberate confidence of someone wearing night optics. She needed to change the rules of the room. At the end of the hallway, a tall antique clock stood against the wall, its weights suspended on long brass chains. Reyna reached it in 6 steps, felt for the mechanism housing in the dark by memory of what she'd noticed when she came in, found the chain with her fingers, and cut it clean with the surgical blade. The weights hit the floor like a gunshot. The figure spun toward the sound. She caught the pale green glow of night vision monoculars scanning across the hallway, a suppressed rifle barrel swinging in a trained arc toward the clock. Reyna came from the left, driving the steel flashlight into the side of the optic mount with everything she had, every pound of weight, every month of fury, every mile of running that was supposed to be over by now. The monoculars shattered. The man stumbled sideways, firing blind, 3 suppressed rounds punching into the ceiling plaster above her. She went for the rifle. He was bigger and trained and not starving. He got his forearm under her chin and drove her back into the wall hard enough to pull the air from her lungs. The knife came up toward her ribs. She caught his wrist with both hands, holding the blade 6 inches from her body, with the kind of leverage that comes from years of controlling animals twice your weight through terrain that wanted both of you dead. She held it. She could not push it back. "Colonel Hadley extends his regards," the man said. The Colt 45 fired once. The sound of it in a closed hallway was enormous and absolute and completely final. The man dropped. Reyna stood against the wall, breathing hard, and looked at Constance Bellamy standing 10 feet away, the service pistol leveled at chest height, its barrel still carrying a thread of smoke. The old woman's grip had not moved a millimeter. Her face was composed entirely of angles. "My husband carried that pistol for 31 years, Constance said. She lowered it with the deliberateness of someone who understands exactly what a weapon is and what it costs to use one. He was a man who believed in institutions and the law. He would have preferred a courtroom." She looked at what was on the floor. He also would have understood. The intercom on the hallway wall clicked. "Sergeant Foss," Dr. Tilson's voice, exhausted, solid, and the best sound Reyna had heard in 11 months. "Surgery's complete. We have the chip. He is stable. He is going to be fine." Reyna's back slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor of Constance Bellamy's hallway in the wreckage of the antique clock, and she breathed. Just breathed. For the first time in almost a year, she let herself do only that. 72 hours later, the encrypted contents of the titanium communicator chip, routed through a secure legal channel directly to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, bypassing every layer of command structure that Hadley had spent 15 years constructing around himself like a fortress, landed simultaneously on 3 separate desks in Washington. Colonel Pierce Hadley was taken into custody at his office in the Pentagon on a Tuesday morning by 4 military police officers and 2 federal agents. He did not resist. He had the look of a man who has been waiting for a specific knock on a specific door for a very long time and finds something close to relief when it finally arrives. He was court-martialed on charges of espionage, conspiracy, and criminal complicity in the deaths of 11 soldiers. He was sentenced to life in federal prison at Leavenworth without the possibility of parole. Through Constance Bellamy's contacts, accumulated over 60 years of standing beside a man who had earned the trust of people who mattered, and then standing alone after he was gone and earning it herself, Reyna Foss received a full presidential pardon. Her rank was restored, her discharge reclassified as honorable, with full back pay deposited to an account that had been frozen for nearly a year. She requested only one additional document. She was standing in the sunlit kitchen of the house on Lakeview Terrace when it came through. Printed on Department of Defense letterhead, signed in blue ink at the bottom, in the neat official hand of an officer in the K9 Administrative Division. Official transfer of military working dog K9M226 designated Bolt to handler Sergeant Reyna Foss, effective immediately and in perpetuity. Bolt was lying in a rectangle of winter sunlight on the kitchen tile, his abdominal sutures healing cleanly, a rawhide chew held between his front paws. He was already 4 pounds heavier than he'd been a week ago. His eyes, tracking Reyna as she crossed the room, were dark and sharp and entirely themselves again. Constance came in from the garden, her cane leaving precise small holes in the frost, still clinging to the path, and stopped in the doorway when she saw Reyna's face. "Good news," she said. It was not a question. "He's officially mine," Reyna said. Constance made a sound that was not quite a smile and not quite a sigh, but contained something of both. She looked at Bolt, who had looked up from his chew to observe her, with the frank, unhurried assessment of a dog who has already decided whether or not he trusts you and has no interest in revisiting the decision. "He always was," Constance said. Reyna looked around the kitchen, the copper pots, the morning light coming hard and clean through the window, the sound of Dr. Tilson moving somewhere upstairs, the antique clock in the hallway, whose pendulum weights had already been replaced and whose ticking had resumed with the patience of something that had never doubted it would. "We should probably find our own place," Reyna said. "We've been here 2 weeks." Constance settled into her chair at the kitchen table with the unhurried deliberateness of a woman who has decided exactly how she intends to spend whatever time she has remaining and is entirely at peace with that decision. "This house has 12 rooms," she said. "Dr. Tilson occupies 2 of them. Howard's study has been locked since he died, because I was not ready to go in there. I believe I am almost ready." She looked at Reyna. "And that dog has not left the kitchen since we brought him upstairs, which suggests he has already made his preference on the matter known." Reyna looked at Bolt. He had set his chin back down on the rawhide. His tail moved once against the tile floor, a single slow thump, unhurried and certain, like a period at the end of a sentence he had already finished writing. Reyna sat down across from Constance Bellamy at the kitchen table, in the cold winter light of northern Idaho, with the document folded in her hand and her dog warm at her feet. For the first time in 11 months, she had nowhere left to run.